Hey everyone, my name is Darrell and I'm back with another video. So in the last video, we walked through the process of how we took a file that was already made but wasn't necessarily ready for 3D printing, taking those components, breaking them down and making them ready for 3D printing, and then 3D print them. This video is going to be a little different. I'm actually going to do a full build. I'm going to actually model a object, print it, and then do the post-processing on it. So over the past year or so, I've been building a portfolio of build videos. And sadly, I just realized that most of these builds are around superheroes, but around male figures. So in my conscious effort to make that change, I want to do a build around one of the most iconic female superheroes. And that is none other than Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman has carried over some iconic pieces throughout the years. But one thing that's pretty much stayed the same and has varied slightly as I was doing research for this project is her tiara. And I am going to do a build around her tiara. So just a little backstory on how I decided to do this build. A good friend of mine's, Jerry, over at Spectra 3D had asked me to model Wonder Woman's tiara for him. He has a good friend of his, which is now a good friend of mine's. Her name is Kelly, and she does wonderful Wonder Woman cosplay. She embodies the hero, and she just plays it to the T, and she looks the part. So he asked me if I can model this certain tiara that he sent me concept art for, and asked me if I can model it and produce a 3D model for him that he can print on his own. So what I did was, being that I just realized I haven't had many builds around female characters, I thought it would be a good idea to do a build around her tiara. So the version that I sent him is slightly different than the version I am doing today. I added just a bit more detail and changed a few different things. So the iconic tiara has a 5-point star on it, and that's carried across the years. But just recently in the 2017 Wonder Woman movie, they added a 8-point star to the tiara. So with my version that I have done and printed, I have added the 8-point star, and I added a bit more detail into the tiara. So walk with me through this process of printing and finishing Wonder Woman's tiara. I hope you guys enjoy the video. I know something is gonna go wrong. As with every build, there's always a lesson learned. So let's get started. Hey everyone, so I have Cinema 4D open. Let's hop right in and see what we have. So this was the first iteration that I sent them. So I went back and I opened up the back, and so this is the version, this is the final version that Jerry has and that he's printing for Kelly. I went back and just did a few changes. So this is the version that we are going to print today, and there's just a few changes. I added some details in the front and along the side of the tiara, and I added the 8-point star just so that there's some alteration and some differences between the two that he prints and then I print. And what I didn't state is that I agreed to him that I would not release these files in any manner. So him and I are the only ones that have these files. So I just wanted something a little different and unique to me. And then he has the files for Kelly that are unique to him and Kelly. So let's go ahead and send this to the slicing program, add supports, and then prep it for the printer. All right, so I have the slicing program open. I already have the tiara in, and I already added supports. So what I did was I flipped the tiara 180 degrees, so it's printing upside down. And the reason why I did this was to save on support material. Had I had printed it right side up, I would have a lot of support material that would be needed to help support this whole area in the front here, and then also the areas in the back. It may look like a lot of support material is being used here, but it's far more less than what would be used if it was printed right side up. So I'm gonna go ahead and let the slicer run and see how long this is gonna take. All right, so this has run its course through the slicing program, and according to this, the ETA is 16 hours and 3 minutes, and I know that that's what it is, an ETA. This is roughly gonna take 20 to 24 hours on the print bed. So we're gonna go ahead and send this to the printer, have it print, and then we'll return once we have a printed tiara. took about 24 hours to print, and the print came out fine. I did have a few issues when I took it off the bed, so I'm going to talk about those issues. I did run into some issues with the tiara when I was taking off the bed. A few parts of the tiara actually snapped off and I glued them back together. So that lets me know that there's some weak points within this tiara, and especially towards the ends here. So it's really the ends that are weak. So this point right here actually snapped off. I had to glue back together, and this point snapped off. And as I was cleaning off some of the supports, I've noticed that this area right here is really weak, right in this area here. So what I'm going to do to strengthen this is coat the back of this with epoxy coat and let that dry overnight and harden. And then this way we have enough support in the back of the tiara, so when I go in to sand it, we won't have a bunch of pieces snapping or just have this thing break on us while we're cleaning this up. So I started off by mixing the epoxy coat according to its mix ratio, and I carefully applied it on with a popsicle stick and then went back in with a brush to kind of smooth everything over. I was really careful in how I applied it because I didn't want any spillovers on the front of the tiara, and then I allowed this 2 days to dry, and I applied 2 coats as well. Hey everyone, it's been about 2 days since I last applied the second coat of epoxy coat onto the back of the tiara, and everything has dried and it feels like a really good solid piece now. The areas where I was concerned about, where they had either snapped off or were weak, feel fully supported. So I do feel comfortable enough to go ahead and start the sanding process on this. Oh, and one last quick note, I did add some magic sculpt to the top of the tiara. As it was printing, the little piece here had broke off. Not sure why that happened. Again, 3D printing is always a hit and miss, so you never really know what's going to happen when you have the print on the bed. But I was able to go in and sculpt out a little piece, and I'm going to go sand this. I'm going to sand this down and get it looking how it's supposed to look. So let's get started on this, all right? So we start the long and tedious process of sanding, and here I'm starting with 100 grit, and I slowly move up to higher grits throughout the process. So as you can see, where this printed upside down on this orientation, there is a lot of cleanup work to do here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sanding this down with 150 grit. It's not too coarse where it's going to damage the print, just enough so I can knock back these lines. And then I'm going to fill this whole area with spot glazing putty, sand it down, get it as smooth as I can, and then go back and reapply spot glazing putty again if need be. So I'm going to go ahead and start knocking this area down, and then also these areas along here also have those jagged print lines. So I'm going to go ahead and get that down as much as I can with the sandpaper, and then go ahead and apply spot glazing putty to this. So I'm starting to knock back some of the rougher print lines, and these came from the supports and it printing upside down. And I also go into the finer details with a needle file. This helps with getting in those hard to reach areas. I decided before I apply the spot glazing putty that I would apply some primer filler so I can see where I was at and what areas still needed some more work. So I just applied 1 coat to the tiara before I moved on to the spot glazing putty. Here I am applying that spot glazing putty to the top of the tiara, and then I also used the opportunity to apply it to other areas where it needed some more work and filling, and went about the process of sanding it down. And I started off with 220 because it's a lighter grit and it was easier on the spot glazing putty where it won't take off too much, but it'll sit in the print lines and kind of do that filling that we needed to do. So this area right here that I'm pointing to chipped off during the sanding process. Not sure what happened, but it just came right off. So what I did to fix this problem area is I mixed up some Epoxy Sculpt, and I just mixed up 2 even parts. And if you allow this to dry overnight, it hardens up, and it can be used to fill in seam lines, any problem areas that break off like this. So I just went about filling in those areas, and then I filled in some of the seam lines that I had as well. And I also used some water to smooth it out and feather it into the print, so this way I didn't have much sanding to do. Once I let it sit overnight and dry, I used 220 sandpaper and lightly sanded over it so I can blend it in with the rest of the finish that I had. So I'm cleaning up my needle file with a brass brush to get out any of the gunk that's caught in between the needle file, and then I'm doing the final pass in the detail areas before we start the wet sanding process. And for the wet sanding, I use 1500 and 2000 grit sanding paper and go over the entire tiara inside and out to make sure that we have a smooth surface. So now I'm applying the final coat of primer, and this is the results of many hours of sanding. So I allowed this to dry overnight after applying 2 more coats, and now I am applying some black gloss enamel spray paint to the tiara so that we have a base coat before we apply the mirror chrome. So I allowed the enamel to dry overnight, and now I am applying Alclad's mirror chrome to the tiara, and I was surprised with the results that I got. I didn't expect it to come out this well. I sprayed it on the inside and out, and the results were just fantastic. Super happy with how the results came out. But all right, guys, so let's talk for a minute. My goodness. All right, so if you guys know anything about me and how I typically try to run my videos, I try to be as open as possible about the builds. I don't like to gloss over anything or any mistakes that I made. So this project is no different than any other project. So I decided to go with the gold and silver color scheme for the tiara. But in the process of that and getting everything done, I wasn't satisfied with the way it came out. It just did not look right. So I went through the process of painting it. I used Alclad's mirror gold over the mirror chrome. The base color looked alright. It dulled it down a bit because I did use aqua gloss clear coat over it, but it dulled down the metallic finish on it just a bit. When I initially got the first coat on, I wasn't extremely satisfied, but I moved forward anyway. And I went through the process of masking everything off, and then I actually sprayed the mirror chrome over the gold, and it kind of gave it like a champagne gold color. It wasn't necessarily a high silver or a metallic silver. It gave it a nice, it really complemented the gold. So it wasn't overly overbearing, or it didn't pop too much. It was a really nice color. But where I messed it up was I did too much weathering on it, and I went way too far, and it took away from the entire tiara, and it just looked bad. I even asked my wife, and before I even weathered it, she was like, just don't do too much. And you can really get carried away with weathering, and with this project I really did get carried away. So I went back and I decided to take a gamble. Instead of resanding everything and starting from the beginning painting process, I decided to just spray the black enamel over the paint job that I already did. Now, it could have went really bad. I could have sprayed it and then had a whole bunch of cracking and then had to restart the whole sanding and prepping it process all over again. But luckily enough, it didn't. So prior to spraying the black enamel, I had already clear coated the tiara with aqua gloss. So I think that kind of helped and prevented the enamel from cracking or having any issues, because it went on just fine. I allowed it a few hours to dry before I went back with the mirror chrome airbrush and recoated it. So I decided to stick with the chrome finish. I think it looked fantastic before I even sprayed the gold on it, so I'm not even sure why I did it, but I was trying to go with the whole classic gold and keep with the theme of Wonder Woman, but this is not a typical tiara that you see for her, so I think the chrome added to the difference in it being something new and something different for the Wonder Woman look. Again, I like to stay open about the mishaps that I have in a project, and as I stated before, I knew something was gonna go wrong, so on with the video. So I decided to airbrush the weathering and just to bring out the details of the tiara. This was just a much more safer method for the finish that I was going for, and it came out fantastic. Super happy that I decided to change up the color scheme, and to me this just looks better and a much cleaner result. Alright guys, so that concludes this build video. Here is the tiara. I am super pleased and super happy how this came out, and with the color decision that I decided to land on for this build. I would try this on, but I'm afraid that it's gonna break because I have a big head, and this by no means will scale to fit my head at all. I've actually tried to squeeze it on my head a few times, but yeah, I just don't want to break it. After all that work, it just want to be good. I think my wife wants to wear this for Halloween, so yeah, that's what this is gonna be used for, and it'll probably just be on display in the man cave here. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and taking the time to watch this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So until next time, peace and love. God bless.